thank you to everyone who has traveled near and far to get to Copenhagen for KubeCon. I'm glad you're able to join us today. And a special thank you to the two sponsors we have for creating this opportunity for us to share a meal and have some good conversation. That would be Google and Heptio. So maybe a short round of applause for... I'm Sarah Conway. I'm the Senior Director of PR Services at the LF and CNCF. I joined the company around 5 years ago, at which time I actually attended the very first Women in Open Source lunch. The name has changed, and it's broader. And that was at LinuxCon, another name that has changed and evolved through the years. It certainly was a refreshing and sort of novel concept at that time for an open source event to come together and share, war stories, networking, new relationships, both personal and business related. And I think certainly the open dialogue really remains relevant and helpful. But through the years, I've really seen a lot of projects within the LF orbit, from Node to Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry, OPNFV, really become a lot more intentional and purposeful and focused on creating broader and more diverse and more welcoming communities. And I think that's really been wonderful to see. Of course, we hope that the conversation continues, and that's always helpful. But I think what we're really trying to nurture as well is ways to extend this beyond one or two events and provide the support and focus that this issue requires year-round. We'll hear a little bit from Paris Pittman toward that end, who is trying to get some Kubernetes mentoring initiatives off the ground. And our sponsors will share some of their own reasons for supporting diversity in events like this. We'll also have a little bit of a panel discussion, hopefully share some practical tips on your first PR or where to go for documentation help, something that can be action-oriented and you can take away from this event. And touch on, some hot button issues like the gender wage gap, which we continue to hear so much about. I think that we find that obviously, whether it's legal or policy issues, or the viral Me Too occurrences, or still shocking headlines in newspapers, that the wage gap and related issues are really ever present. But with the attention, I think there's a great opportunity to affect some change, and that hopefully there'll be more people in the room next year with more diverse faces, and we hope to see those that grow within our communities as well. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Google or Heptio. I don't know who's up first. And this is Chris Nova with Heptio.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming. So we're gonna do a quick show of hands here. Who here is here for the first time at a KubeCon? At a KubeCon, not at the lunch, at a KubeCon. Okay, so at a KubeCon, this is all your guys' first time, wow. Okay, who's here because of the diversity sponsorship that we did? Okay, welcome, we're so happy you guys are all here. Who has won a diversity scholarship in the past, but has returned for another event at KubeCon? Welcome back, it's good to see you. Who was on the sponsorship with me when there was only 5 of us? This is Lucas back here. Oh, and you too, hi, welcome. So 3 of us are back here. This has been 2 years. We've been coming back to KubeCon events since we originally won. The first one, there was 5 people who won. 3 of them are in the room. And so now we have a whole room of people, so I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that. Anyway, I work at a company called Heptio. We're based out of Seattle. We do a ton around Kubernetes and open source. Diversity is super important to us. It's one of the core values of our company, and the reason that diversity is important for us is, like, starting the company, we had Joe and Craig, and they said, we want to change the tone. We want things to be different. And we've done things like we set job levels from day one before we even meet the people with salary attached to that, so that regardless of who you are, what color your skin is, or where you come from, you're going to come in and get paid a fair price. We've also embraced the idea that diverse thought in our company creates better products, creates better software, and creates a happier environment for everyone. So diversity is super important to us. So we sponsor this lunch, and we help sponsor the scholarship that brought so many of you out here. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome. I'm Aparna. I'm from Google. We're really excited to partner with Heptio and the CNCF to sponsor a variety of diversity initiatives. and certainly this lunch. And we're looking forward to meeting more and more of you here today. I mentioned this in my keynote. I've worked in enterprise software for all of my career. It is not a very diverse place, especially infrastructure. It's very, very one kind. And it's a tough environment. And I think I see a lot of nodding heads. It's really important to be out there and set examples and be inclusive. I think the Kubernetes community and the values that the community has really foster that. But we still, if you look at the numbers, it's abysmal in terms of the user base and also in terms of the contributor base. It's very one type. Joe and the founders of Heptio, they come from Google. Google has a very inclusive type of culture. And we value diversity very much. But even at Google, and we look at the numbers all the time, there's just not enough diversity. In our group in particular, the Kubernetes team at Google, we've been trying to hire more women. We've been trying to hire more diverse candidates. Actually, our head of engineering is a female. Head of product, that's me. And we have some level of diversity, but I would say, we would want, certainly on the gender scale, to have 50-50. And, much more diverse representation in terms of African Americans and in terms of other types of genders. And we are really far behind on all of those. I've been excited by the initiatives of the CNCF. Every time I come to these conferences, there's support for mothers, there's support for children. I hope that people take advantage of those things. And then, talk about the problems, talk about the challenges you're facing. Just yesterday, one of the women on my team, she's breastfeeding, and the power adapter, it doesn't work anymore, so she can't pump. And a lot of people think that others won't relate to these kinds of problems, but that's why we're here. And again, it's an open community. The more you talk about the challenges you face, the more you'll find that there are others who face similar challenges and can help you.
Check,
All
check,
right.
1, 2.
Check. Yeah, you want to do mic checks really quick?
Check.
All right. Yeah.
Wait, okay. Yeah, I think it's working.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Paris Pittman. I work at Google in the Cloud Open Source Office, specifically supporting Kubernetes. Anyway, I am going to allow for the panel to give brief introductions on themselves, and then we're going to get right into it. We'll start with some of those hot button issues that were mentioned earlier, and then we'll go into things like open source topics, and then end it with some mentoring initiatives that we currently have going on specifically for Kubernetes. And if you are with other projects, maybe you can possibly take some of that information to those projects as well. All right, so Chris, do you want to start off?
Yep. Hi. My name's Chris Nova. I work for Heptio. Diversity is really important to us.
Skip.
Okay.
Is there a gong?
Yeah.
Gong.
Do I have like a gong?
Gong hit. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Caleb Miles. I'm lucky to work at Google with Aparna on Google Kubernetes Engine. For that, I've worked in open source, for my whole career. Worked on Ceph and Cloud Foundry after that.
Hi, I'm Erica. I am a software engineer at Red Hat. Came along with the CoreOS acquisition into Red Hat, so new family there for me. I'm currently working on the security team for OpenShift.
Hey, I'm Cheryl. I'm at a London-based startup called StorageOS. We do persistent storage for containers. Previously, I was a software engineer at Google. As product manager, I do a ton of things, but eventually I boil it down to I code, write, and speak about containers, storage, and cloud.
Hi, I'm Shanice Winland. I run finance and operations at Heptio, so I'm responsible for recruiting and HR there. And I've spent my entire career at tech companies, but mostly on the finance and operations side. So it's been really exciting to be part of this Kubernetes community and be here at the conference learning a lot about the technology.
Awesome. Round of applause for our panel. All right, and just a quick note that I would love for this to be as interactive as possible. So if you do have a question for the panelists or have something to add or anything like that, just do me a favor and raise your hand and I'll run out to you. And just keep your hand raised, though, just in case I can't see you. Cool? All right. So by a show of hands, did anyone attend the keynote yesterday where Dirk Hondel from VMware took over his innovation with a diversity topic? Wasn't that awesome? Snaps for Dirk. I thought it was really in particular that he really made the call to action of hiring women. Did any of our panelists see that? Cool. Any thoughts that you want to share? Chris, you want to go first? Sounds like you have some thoughts.
I'll let somebody else go first. Did anybody else see it?
Oh, well, just a recap too, in case folks did miss it. Outside of the call to action that he had for hiring, he was really saying that, wow, there's a lot of white dudes out there that look like me. And that's kind of what brought me up from my computer screen. I was like, whoa, like, what? And so he was really talking about how conferences and open source in general, there's a lot of folks that look like him and how he'd like to see more, and sort of kind of like why he doesn't understand why we're just not hiring women. So that was the context for anybody that missed it.
Oh, we have a question too. Okay, cool. Yeah, so like this really like strikes a chord with me. I think it's really hard, but also really important for everybody to like realize that it starts with you. This isn't like a pill you can take or like something you can go and just like sign up for, or do some paperwork or throw money at the problem. Like really, like you yourself right now, when you get out of here, like you need to say the word diversity at least one more time today to somebody else, and you need to like bring it up and talk about it. And then like, I'm sorry, but it's going to be like that for the rest of your life. Like it doesn't stop ever. You got to just kind of be aware of it. And I think he was hinting at that like we need to start talking about it in tech, and it's an engineering problem, and we need to treat it as such. So like at these lunches, I really like want to encourage people, when you get out of here, do something about it, take action. And if you have ideas, more importantly, like let's start talking about those.
I'll also say that my initial reaction upon hearing it is like cringe, and it feels like really awkward to me. And there's like the skepticism of like, yeah, we've heard this, we get it, okay, great, brownie points for you. And then at the same time, there's also the real, like, you do look around and see a lot of white dudes, and it's kind of sad. And yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge also the just awkwardness of the people saying it, and then the action being very slow.
Paris, hi. Great props for all the outreach that you guys are doing, and the tone that you're setting in this community is fabulous. And I've been in tech, well, I'm 52, so I've been in tech since I started programming in 6th grade, 5th grade. How do we showcase the senior women that have persisted in this industry? Because like Erica said, my first reaction wasn't like, yay, he's up on stage talking about, this is a new problem and we need to do something about it. Those of us that have been around for a long time, it's not a new problem. So what actions can we take to showcase the senior women or senior people who underrepresented groups?
Yeah, I think we need to give you a chance to have a voice. So not everyone's going to be in a management position where they're sort of automatically given a voice within a company, but there's plenty of opportunity for leadership. So we need to make sure they get opportunities to speak at conferences, be part of leadership discussions at companies, and showcase your skills and your seniority throughout your companies. So that really comes from management, allowing for those opportunities, and for women and minorities coming together and insisting that they get them.
Another thing I want to point out is, in my career, I've always found it like you can get into a place, especially if you've been working somewhere for a while or you're more senior in your field, where you get kind of into this rhythm and it becomes kind of almost awkward to like get out of it. So I really think that events like this or company events that you could create that sort of could be the trigger for making some change and taking action, like what Shana suggested, are actually really good ideas. One of my last jobs I worked at before I worked at Microsoft, we had somebody who was there for 10 years and never got a promotion. And then finally we were getting sold to, I'm not going to say who, but we were getting sold to a large tech giant, not Microsoft. And this was the first time. And we had a picnic, and that's when she finally got her promotion, and she's like, I've been waiting for this for 5 years, but it never happened because there was never any sort of event to trigger that change. So I do think events are important as well.
I just wanted to make a comment as well. So I run the Cloud Native London meetup group. We usually get 200 to 300 monthly attendees, so it's a fairly decent-sized group. And I work with Docker London and Kubernetes London and Istio London and the other meetup organizers to try and bring in more women to be speakers. It's true, I still sit and look around at the attendees and go, it's not a very diverse crowd. But the first step in that is getting the speakers who can be upfront and visible and show off their technical expertise. And I find that men are usually more comfortable with volunteering themselves and jumping ahead of this. So at events like this, I've asked at least 2 women, I don't know if they're here, to come and actually speak at my meetup because I really want it to be something more than just in their own company or whatever, but they need to be visible to everybody else.
And I guess I can also say that if you find yourself, I mean, we all, this is a diversity lunch, but we all also are, have our own privileges. And as an individual, you can take the, proactive step of trying to transfer some of that privilege to someone else. I remember when I was an engineer at Pivotal, a new team lead or tech lead was going to be chosen, and I worked very closely with a colleague that I worked with for a number of years. And even though I had gotten the tap on the shoulder from my engineering director that I was being considered for this position, I really stepped back because I thought certainly that she would do a much better job than myself. And so if you have this kind of privilege of any kind, to try and think about what you can do as an individual to give that to someone else.
So, I really like things like this and, the scholarship programs and stuff like that to bring people to events. But I have 3 daughters that are like 6, 9, and 12. And even at that really young age, they're starting to learn. And I appreciate that this applies wider than women, okay, but they're already starting to learn that certain things are almost off bounds for them, whether it's soccer, whether it's IT. I'm really keen on ideas and initiatives and things to get into things like schools or to get into the minds of children so that they don't start forming these opinions and then they get to the age of 19 or 20 and it's cool to bring them to something like this, but some of the damage is already done. And it's a big challenge, right? But is there anything that we can do as a community and can organizations do things to get into local communities and schools and things and tell all of those kind of minorities? And I appreciate girls are not a minority. I mean, they're 50%, right? But to get in there and say, this world is your world.
I'll make a comment because I'm guessing from your accent you're British, and I am too. I went to an all-girls school until I was 16, and then it became a mixed thing. And I never, ever got the impression that because I'm a girl, I can't do stuff. Because I was in an environment where everybody's a girl. I'm good at maths. That was my thing, and I appreciate it. And I remember very, very distinctly being about 22 before I realized that people would see me first as a woman, and as a Chinese woman at that, before they saw me as what I thought of myself, which was, I'm Cheryl, I'm British, I'm good at maths, and whatever. So the day-to-day environment is really important. As you say, it's not about the one-off events you can do once a year, but if you want your daughters to be in that environment, then maybe look for things that they can do weekly and build that confidence and that part of their own identity from a young age.
And then to follow up on that, this might be an overshare, but whatever. So I grew up with a twin brother and a little brother. We were 3 boys before I transitioned. I grew up in South Texas, and it was like a really, really rough place. And I remember my dad and my coach saying things along the lines of like, you don't want girls on your team. You guys want to be the best. So I think we need to flip it around. Like, I think taking action as a father of 3 girls is half of the battle. I think the other half is talking to the dads of the 3 boys who are saying, you don't want girls on your team. And like, we got to fix that problem first, so.
One of my, just to riff off that, well, a bit. One of my favorite books in life is Design for the Real World by Victor Papanek. It's came out in the 70s, radical architect, industrial designer. He has this chapter, a whole chapter about appropriate toys for children. And since we're in the country of Lego, it's very important, or at least he thought it was very important, to give all children the same kind of building creative toys. When I was in undergrad, I'm an American, so I only know math as a singular.
We're in Europe, call it maths.
We had a program called the Math Circle that was modeled after a program that started in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where it brings in elementary school age children to learn abstract concepts in mathematics or maths through group activities. And there is wonderful because I think, at least what I saw in that group, that both the young boys and young girls there, they were equally keen, although, if I'm honest, the young girls were a little bit more keen on working together. And so finding these kind of programs, I think, is very important, wherever your school is, to get boys and girls working together on solving this challenge young, like you're saying, before the the harshness of our current society seeps in.
I had a couple of comments on the kids thing. I completely agree with starting at the grassroots level, especially at home. Like, for example, I have a daughter, and when I go to work or even when I travel now for the conference, it's like telling her that mommy is going to a conference. She works in computer, like telling them what it is that we do. It makes them appreciate it much more. And also at home, my husband ends up teaching how to cut and do crafts while I teach her like maths and stuff like that. So that really helps. She sees that, there can be role reversal as well. And in Google, there's a lot of take your kids to work day, which I find is fascinating. There's so many kids who come and see, and I think there's all other companies do that too. I think that's like phenomenal. And also, when I used to when she asked me some question, or why is this toy working this way? I used to say, oh, the uncle made it this way. Or when I say, why is this painting? I used to unconsciously assign soft skills to women and hard skills to men when I tell her, oh, this thing works like this because the uncle built it this way or he coded it this way. These days I consciously kind of make it. Say, okay, maybe the auntie did it this way as well. So, those things kind of stick to them, I feel.
Okay, I didn't want to cut anyone else. I think someone had a question for. It's okay.
Hi. You were all talking about that getting women to give talks is important. So I run a local Women Who Go group back home, and the last meeting we had 40 women there, and we have a core group that's I don't know, 3 or 4 of us that basically it's always us doing everything. And at every time we're hunting down everyone who seems a little bit extroverted and going, can you give a talk? Can you give a talk? Do you want to give a talk? I'll help you. But I don't know, it's really hard. Do you have any tips on how to get people to?
Free beer.
We have that. It didn't work.
One of the things that I notice is that people think that, and women more so, think that their experiences and their stories are not worth telling, and you have to actively get them over that hurdle of, there are many people who appreciate the very early stage of beginner of how did you first get started in this, What's the story of how your organization got to where it is now? So it's not that you have to set this stupidly high bar where only if you're doing genius level things are you good enough to give a talk. You have to help people over that stage first. And also people are genuinely nervous the first 1 or 2 times they do a talk, and usually they get better over time.
Yeah, I think hope is an important word to mention here. When I first came to KubeCon in 2016, I kind of was subject to that myself. I didn't really think I was like worth it. Like I had contributed to Kubernetes and like I had written some cool bash scripts, but like I wasn't anything exciting. And like now I've been on the keynote stage and I'm like booked wall to wall at KubeCon whenever I come. So I think getting women on stage is like the first half, and then once it's there, you kind of like break this new boundary of like they believe in themselves and you can help them get there. And then the next step is being like, okay, now it's your job. Take that and spread it. It should be recursive, right? Like we should dig into it and you should continue to make that grow yourself. So if we do this right, like this sort of problem should grow exponentially. Or the solution should, not the problem.
That was actually, Ellen just took sort of my next question. Thank you, Ellen. We see a lot today, especially on Twitter, for conferences that are still 99% male. I mean, not even necessarily attendees, but a lot of conferences that have just been discovered that almost all of their speakers are men. You know, I think there was one that was 99 speakers that were mostly white males with one woman. So my question was going to be similar to Ellen's. How can we implement some kind of speaker, inclusion writer, if you will? You hear this also in Hollywood, where folks have decided that they're not going to work on a movie or production unless there was some kind of diversity plan included. Like, what can we do as attendees and things like that to make sure that that diversity is, at the forefront?
So I'm a really big fan of turning down conferences. I do it a lot, especially if they don't have diversity clause written, or I can go look and see previous years. And I usually I don't just say, no, I'm done, I'm not going to attend your conference. I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm like, hey, so I noticed last year it was, concrete fact, whatever it was. Most of your talks were white guys is usually what it is. And I'm wondering how, what are your plans to change it this year? And usually the responses are somewhere along the lines of no response whatsoever, or we don't really have a plan, but if you would like, we can give you another speaking spot that you can give away. That's usually not enough for me, so I just say no thank you, I'm not interested, and move on. But I kind of beat myself up because I think there should be more than that. I don't want to shame anyone, but I think that it's probably about time for us to start coming together and do we make a list? What are the next steps to solving that problem?
I wasn't taking this to speak. But did we ever get to Paris's question? Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was just commend you on wanting to get your daughters to see more representation, and just advice is just, I think, just change your language. Within a lot of organizations, we still say he created this instead of they. But getting involved in camps, I'm not too sure what's involved here in Britain, but in the States we have Girls Who Code, and so they get to see a lot of women do what they love to do, and so they get to stand more confidence. I want to commend you on standing in your truth, because I thought I may be the only LGBTQIA here, so I'm very happy.
Show of hands, alphabet.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. So not alone. Woo. Thank you. And just really quickly, Paris, on your question, just to help increase the numbers is really just get involved in your community and talk to that little girl or that person that may not look like you, and really encourage them. I have a women's network group in my company, and the guys are like, I can't join because I'm a man. And I'm like, no, we need your support. And seeing a guy that support you, no offense, it feels a lot more empowering when a guy can know what you're going through. So yeah.
Yeah, so I had somebody, I won't say who, I was like, you should really come to the diversity lunch. And they're like, no, I'm a white guy. And I'm like, that's the problem. Right there, that is the problem. We all know it's a problem, but we need to reach the people who are not in this room right now. like, and that's all the white guys out there who are not in here that we need to talk to.
It's a bit of a diversion, but one of the reasons that I work for StorageOS, my current company, is that the CEO of the company is a gay man. And one of the first questions, not first, but in the first interview, he asked me was, you're going to be the only woman on a team of entirely men. How do you feel about that? Is that something that bothers you or worries you? Or is there anything that we can do to make your life easier? And if you ever have any problems, then we need to fix it as soon as possible. That level of commitment from the CEO, from the very, very top, was something that I would like a lot of organizations to have. Alas, I still work in an office with only men, but hey.
Are you hiring, though?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, too, it can come at the board level. One of the things that we did at Heptio was we made our board actually adopt our handbook around harassment and diversity and inclusion, and said that we will not accept any board members that act this way. I don't know if you've read the news about some of the VCs in San Francisco. And so we just said we're not going to put up with it at our company and made them agree to it so that we could, get someone off the board that wasn't acting correctly. So I think that's a very powerful thing to do as well. Yeah.
Okay. Now that you're talking about women getting involved in technology and working, I want to ask you, what are the companies doing with women that are old enough to pursue a career in technology and they already have a degree in some other background, maybe law, maybe agriculture, or something like that, but they want to move to the technology field?
So there's a ton of programs. I know in Seattle we've got the Ada Academy that kind of puts women through a boot camp that allows them to be able to get an internship with a technology company. We had a couple of them work at Heptio over a summer. So there's a lot of support out there for that. I know as a startup it's difficult for us. We have a few people and want to be able to support people getting up and running on technology and learning new technology, but you have to have the mentorship support in organizations to do that. And I'm sure bigger companies have a lot more, probably at Google, programs for that.
Yeah, and at Google we work with Outreachy, among others, to help improve our people, our candidate pool, and get people the skills they need to transition from some other career. I can speak to my time working at Pivotal and my experience with companies like ThoughtWorks. The interview process can also be really important. It can be really, again, my background was in maths. So it was, yeah. It's okay. Yeah. So it was really, I found it really nice when interviewing at Pivotal for my second engineering job, to have a pair programming session rather than just a long list of questions or a whiteboarding session. To actually be able to interact with a person, to feel that it was safe to be asking questions as someone who didn't do formal study in computer science. So I think it's a lot on the companies as well to tailor their hiring process to make sure that they're not losing qualified people just because they don't have the right degree or something.
One of the things, if you come from a non-science or non-engineering background, is there are roles which don't necessarily require an engineering background. Product management is one of those roles. Product marketing is another one of those roles. I think to some extent, open source program management and other types of program management, certainly at Google, you don't need to have a technical background for those. In addition, there's a lot of training, most of it online and free, that you can take to learn some of the like at least the landscape of technology. And then lastly, for the interview process, we do offer mentoring, especially for women, before the interview to kind of prepare you for the interview.
I'm shocked that our panelists haven't mentioned this, but contributing to open source. That is I think, key that most white males usually have ahead in candidate pools. And I think that's super critical that, I mean, we're going to get to this in a second too when we start asking more open source type questions. But if you don't have a traditional, computer science background contributing to open source because you're technically faceless on the end of a GitHub issue, I think that's super important.
So when I first started contributing to open source, Kubernetes specifically, I paired up with someone who was supposed to be helping me get through the door, and I remember it was my first time I had ever met this person. It was a guy. Somebody started talking, and he started replying, and he looked at me, and he's like, hey, I need you to take notes. And I didn't even think twice about it. I was like, oh yeah, how bad? And I opened up my laptop and started typing everything this guy said. And 10 minutes later, I realized that was the problem. I felt like I just wasn't on his same level because he had been contributing for a while. And then it's now I write way more code than this person does. And frankly, I think it's better code. Yeah.
We had 2 questions back there too. I want to get to those.
First, can I just give a tiny extra bit of advice to the guy with the kids? Sorry, I know we keep coming back to you. Get involved with Code Club. You're one of the people who has an investment in making the society better for your kids. Use that. Get involved with the Code Clubs and encourage the girls who are going to those Code Clubs to get involved in coding. Separately, as an invisible diverse person, I come across as a cis white male. Yes, I'm gay, but that isn't obvious. How can I use that privilege to increase diversity? I mean, if I'm on stage, I can make a big thing about, hey, by the way, I'm gay, I'm diverse. But that I do the cringe thing again, like you said earlier. How can I use that privilege to increase our diversity in tech?
I feel like I always respond, but do you have something?
Yeah. Okay. Definitely. I was sharing about my first opportunity to become a tech lead. Definitely. I had to encourage my colleague quite a bit that she would be an amazing tech lead for the team, and that team grew to be much larger than most of the other teams at Pivotal. She navigated that team through some very choppy waters in the infrastructure space. When you have the opportunity to step back or to push someone else forward, take it. And that's my advice. That's what I've been very thankful or fortunate to be able to do.
When is pushing too hard, though? Is that a thing?
Pushing too hard?
Yeah, meaning pushing women who may not want to be in that role or be in that step.
Hopefully you have a good relationship where they can say no and to you.
I think there's an element of you need to trust people to set their own boundaries and just be explicit about that and just be like, hey, I'm trusting you. Set a boundary. If I push too hard, I'm counting on you to say stop. And if they don't say stop, then don't stop.
That is a hard one. But I think a big one is when you've maybe been marginalized or felt like the odd one out in a group. You're more keen and can tell when someone else is feeling like that. And a lot of times in meetings and things, there'll be people who kind of want to say something, but then kind of step back. And I find one of the best things you can do is really make sure that person, hey, wait, what did you have to say about this? I think that's a really big one.
Can I comment? So I'm going to come back to my CEO again, because when I started, I had the feeling of I'm not. What should I be doing? Tell me what I should be doing. And he told me something that has really stuck with me, which is, you're smart, you're intelligent. We hired you because we trust you to make the right decisions. And go away, think about it, make the right decision, come back and execute on it. And it was remarkable. No one's ever really sort of explicitly said that to me before. And maybe you take it for granted that people know that, hey, I have the power to make my own decisions. But now I try and tell others who felt marginalized that's the case. Pass it on.
Yeah, I had an experience recently where I was talking about something and the person turned and was like, well, what do you think? And I was like, I just was like thrown off. Like I wasn't even expecting my opinion to be like asked like it was going to matter. And that made me realize like how much just that of like turning to someone and actually like as an authority of sorts, how crazy and how much that meant to me.
And I just wanted to talk.
Maybe I should
Antonio. Okay. Actually, I come from a nonprofit called Cloud Network of Women, and we've been starting to study this a little bit. And we found out that if there's a way to remove gender bias in like speaker selection, or even in like enrollment into the coding schools, it seems to be working. So when you remove gender bias in the hiring, you have these hiring contests where there's no name, and here's a puzzle and you have to solve it. And there's a school in San Francisco, it's VC funded, and what they've done is instead of like looking through credentials, it looks at, it gives you a series of problems to work through. And then what happened is the entering class is 50% more women, and without even deliberately doing anything. And so I think that's one thing. And last plug for you is Hobarton School doesn't charge any tuition until you've graduated. But it will take 17% of your first, second, and third year. And now that we've been kind of helping them with scholarships, we see graduates land jobs in LinkedIn, Tesla, like every major tech company, their graduates are getting classes. And that's my last plug.
Good point, Susan. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. One of the thoughts that came to mind was that I think for the folks in this room that came up is one thought that came for me is we have the opportunity to think about our feelings and think about what we're going to do. And I kind of reflected upon my generation and generations past is that they were just working so hard or whatever they had. They just didn't even have the opportunity to think about how to make it more diverse. And I think it's a real big privilege that we actually can sit and think about how we can make it a difference. And I think for the folks in this room, from what we're trying to talk to is, if you have the opportunity to think about how you can make it more diverse, there's a lot of things that we can go out and do in our own communities. Me personally, I was part of what was called an Inroads program, where anyone who wanted to be able to come into this program on the weekends, you would dress up in a suit. Every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, you'd come in, you'd get mentorship, you'd figure out how to do business acumen skills. And then you have the opportunity to go and to actually interview at larger technology companies. And then they would say to these technology companies, we have some great candidates who are going to come in. They're going to be able to have great ideas, but they're also going to have a lot more education and a lot more diverse skills to be able to bring into your company. And so what that mentorship gave me was opportunity to be able to add a lot of value to the company, and it had a program to be able to set up to do that. And so now I do that to other folks in the community too. And I think we're talking about here how we can make a difference. It's hard work. It's going out there and thinking about the opportunity that you have, and then being able to go in the community and figure out how I can mentor someone else to be able to get them the skills they need to be able to have if they don't have it at home, or if they didn't think they had the idea, or if they didn't feel like they could do it. Having a mentor that says like, hey, I'm a woman, or I'm a minority, whatever, and I'm in technology, and I'm doing it, and here's some ways you can be able to do it, and just going out there and grinding it and doing it and find the program it and building it and helping those folks get into there, and then they go out and they do it themselves. So I'd really encourage folks to look into your communities and get your children into it, girls and wherever, but also volunteer in those places too, because these are the folks here in this room who are really passionate about that, and that goes a long way, and then that is just multiplied by the next few folks.
Hi, I'm Andrew Fitch. I run Cloudflare's LGBTQIA+ group called Proudflare. And last week, every month we have a lunch and discussion session where I share a couple articles and we discuss them and we eat lunch and bond. A timely article that I shared at last week's lunch was written by Leanne Pittsburgh of Lesbians Who Tech, and it was called Why Silicon Valley Needs Quotas to Solve Its Identity Crisis. And I thought this was a timely article to bring up right now because I heard somebody ask a question or mention diversity of speakers and everything. So I guess my question or the topic I wanted to raise is what if this conference had a quota? Like Lesbians Who Tech, for their conference, they had 50% women. And then they also introduced 10% non-binary. And people of color, I don't remember which percentage of speakers had to be those. And they were successful immediately because they set that tone and they made sure that it happened. So I wonder if there's a legal gray area, at least in the States, for companies hiring. I don't know that it states clearly you cannot have quotas, you cannot have goals, but what if we at least started doing this for conferences? Do you folks think that there's at least space for doing that at conferences, suggesting that to conference organizers?
I think it's a great idea. I think every conference has a very difficult problem to solve, which is how do we select our speakers, which, quota aside, is actually really hard and takes a lot of time and a lot of man hours, or person hours, I should say. I think seeing it at KubeCon would be fabulous. I could not be happier if that happened here. As far as making that happen, we would have to explore that a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, so perhaps we could just all go and sort of tackle our conference organizers that we know.
Yeah,
and say,
just
hey,
like-
maybe
Yes.
quotas.
It might also be worthwhile too to go through the exercise of saying, okay, here is a resource. Examples like Lesbians Who Tech that say the successful examples here, and here's how you do it, and here's what other people have done. And that way, when we are going and trying to make this change, or at least encourage this change, we have like a document or something we can point to, and that could be a blog or an article or whatever.
Yeah, I think the thing with quotas is people have a lot of strong opinions on it. I would be more afraid of the opinions than necessarily negative effects from it, personally. I don't know how the community would react should that happen. It's kind of a hard thing to do. One of the things that's nice about a quota is it kind of takes the responsibility off of the conference organizers. Like, sorry, we had to have this many people. So I wonder if that's could be a good reason for it, though. But that's just me, like.
Yeah, and I know this is a hard topic because I think we definitely need to encourage that we have lots of different kinds of speakers. But personally, I don't ever want to get chosen just because I'm a woman. I want people to think I'm badass and choose me because of that. And I hope that everyone in this room feels the same way. So that's the only reason that it's difficult for me to. I just have mixed feelings about it, but.
I do think, though, in Europe, or we can take some of like the European examples of on quotas on boards, for instance, and we can see the results from that, and it seems to be mostly successful, that it's increased the quality of the board, not decreased the quality of boards by requiring these quotas, although there's a lot of grumbling about it.
And I was going to say, too, I've heard this from other executives in the U.S., that boards are not saying, I want a minority who's a finance expert to be the finance expert on my board. They're saying, I need all these experts, and then I need a minority or a woman. And I don't want to fill that seat. I want to fill the expert seat on a board, and I think that's what we should be striving for in this room.
Intercept on the way. I also think it's a fallacy to say there is some absolute scale of quality and all speakers can be exactly stack ranked and then we draw the line and that's it. It's a lot more nebulous than that. As someone who's been involved with selecting speakers, it's really, really hard to say this speaker is absolutely better than that. There's usually a few nut jobs who are like, why did you submit this and have a rant about the government? Like, this makes no sense. But aside from that, you should not fall into the trap of thinking that if there is a quota, it necessarily means those people are of lower quality.
Yeah, I was going to just also say there's a certain point where I've just accepted maybe I will be there because I'm the diversity person, but you have to have the confidence that they might have thought that's why they were getting you.
Yeah, and
but you're going to like kick ass anyway.
Every time you get chosen, whether it's because you're the expert or because you were just an afterthought, there's still an opportunity for you to be badass. And like, you can take that opportunity. And there's been a few times where I've gone on stage and I knew that like, oh, Chris is queer and trans, and so we're gonna have her up on stage, and I kind of have a bad attitude. But like in retrospect, I totally could have gone up there and been like, no, go run my open source code. Go check this stuff out. I actually know what I'm talking about here. So you can totally do it.
I'm going to share what we do in the Python community for PyCon, because we went from 1% women speakers to consistently now the last few years 40%. And quotas are part of it, but it's basically what we did is we emailed, there were like probably 4 of us, emailed every woman we knew who had done anything with Python and said, we would love to hear you speak. And they were personal emails, they weren't blanket emails. And, you know, hey, we've seen you speak, you know, and then we kind of tailored it. And part of it was you basically increase the number of submissions that you have, because once you have more submissions, you have more ability to select based on merit, not on quota. Because I don't want to be the woman engineer. I want to be the badass engineer. And so, but I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to know more about that.
Carol is a badass engineer, FYI. Last question, and then we're going to move on to another topic really quick.
Right. So, white guy with glasses in the room.
Welcome.
So, my question was exactly on the topic that you got to in the end. So, I had this thing happen to me a couple of years ago that I still don't know how I could have done better. Basically, there was a really good speaker, great engineer, happened to be female. So afterwards went up to her and asked, like, would you like to come and speak to us? Because we've got this little DevOps days, all that stuff. And she asked me, are you inviting me as a woman or as an engineer? Which at the time came like a complete shock to me. Like, what do you mean as a woman or as an engineer? Aren't you both?
Most days I am.
Yeah, like as a speaker myself, I've accepted. I'm never going to be seen as not a woman, right? Like there's nothing I can do to really like change the impression that I'm going to give, but you kind of go along with that. Say I take the opportunity to show off my skills, but I don't consider it an insult of like, are you a woman or an engineer? You say I'm both. That's fine. It's totally fine. Just like I'm not offended by saying I have black hair or whatever. It's fine. It's me.
I think often the reason maybe you get asked that question is kind of like, how sincere are you? Are you trying to use me to show off something, or is it so like it seems like a trick question, I'm guessing, to you, because it's like, well, yeah, but and I think the more probably I would hope a good way to answer it would be to just try to convince them that you're sincere about wanting to hear their content or, about their expertise.
Yeah, but how can you make the offer, basically request, and avoid this kind of confusion that they're more than just their gender or their color or something? That
is this someone that you'd seen speak, or just,
yes?
do you like, that was an amazing talk. I have this community that I think would really appreciate hearing what you just said. Would you come and speak to us and say the same thing?
In other words, we're not helping.
And just get used to feeling awkward. I mean, this we are not going to solve the problem by remaining in our comfort zones. So you'll be asked, and you'll say both, or you'll say because if I was a great talk, just be honest, and be okay with that being an awkward conversation.
All right. Okay, I'll take one more. Just one more, and then we're moving on really quickly.
So I'm the only woman in my group. I work at Google, though there's a lot of women. And me, more than anybody, wants more women in my group, but I think it falls on my shoulders a lot. All the men in my group are like, can you go to this event? Can you talk to this woman? Can you do this, this, and this? And I love to do it, but it almost is a second job at this point. And I don't know how to turn that around without sounding like a jerk.
Make them talk about how you did that when it comes for your perf cycle. Should I Google?
Yeah, that was literally my next question too. I hear a lot about like free emotional labor and free labor, and like how can we correct that, especially if she's the only person on the team, and then they're like, oh, token woman. Any other advice?
I would suggest, though, to quantify as much as you can exactly what you're doing, so that you can, when it comes to the perf review cycle or whatever, you can very explicitly say, I spent this much time, I did this much engineering work in this much smaller amount of time, as well as you can say, I'm spending too much time doing this kind of interview work. Here, I need these other members to do this. In general, I always find quantify as much as you can to make your case.
Another thing is I try to remind myself anytime there's a difficult problem in my life, it's an opportunity for me to be a badass engineer. So like even for KubeCon, I really struggled last go around with meeting people. I wanted to meet a lot of new people. I know a lot of people had important things to say that I'd be interested in, but I didn't have enough free time, which I think is pretty similar to what you were saying. It was just eating up your life. And so I used Calendly. I wrote a blog about it. I'm trying new ways to automate things and organize things in a fashion that says like, look, like really 10 minutes of my time is important, and I have numbers to back that up and quantify it, like what Erica was saying. So, I have bash scripts that will hit the Google API and like send emails, and I don't mind sending blanket emails to a bunch of guys because like it's saving me time and I can focus on more important things along the way.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, I don't think you have to be a jerk about it, but I think it's okay for you to sit down with your team and say, hey, this is a problem we need to fix together. How can you all take responsibility for helping me find more women and more underrepresented minorities to work within our group? Let's all brainstorm together and figure out how to solve this problem. It shouldn't sit entirely on your shoulders. It should sit on everyone's shoulders.
+1.
All right, let's move on to open source really quick. We only have a couple more minutes left. And I really wanted to touch base on that because I think it's a good call to action. Why is it important for all of these folks to become contributors of some kind of open source project?
Well, that's a large question.
I liked that.
I mean, yeah, because this is going to just get into the whole, like, what open source is and what it means. But I think an important thing is open source is changing the way we run our systems. It's changing our daily lives, and we should be there and a part of that, and making it great software, or great whatever open source. I guess there's open everything now. That's number one.
And I'll say it also because software in general is, to use my, I guess, pointy-haired manager phrase, eating the world. So, as a African-American black individual, I, have to try a couple times at not every soap dispenser. That video you may have seen on YouTube, it's actually true. And it's things like that. Things that don't go through testing against a diverse audience will probably not work for that diverse audience. I think one of my favorite things that I've seen recently on television was the behind the scenes for the HBO show Insecure, where they're talking about how the difficulty of lighting black skin. So if we're not involved in these communities and software particularly, the world will move on and not make products that work for us. So that's, I guess, my call to action.
And I know it's harder to give a concrete example when you're talking about like infrastructure software. There's not as like maybe obvious examples of how diverse thought improves it, but it's just the more different perspectives that come in, that does result in better problem solving. Unicode, good, okay, yeah. So there are little examples.
Can I give one more example? Yeah. Google Photos can group people together, like group photos together and identify individuals. And I visited Beijing a few years back and I took some photos of the Chairman Mao portrait above Tiananmen Square. And it labeled my grandfather as Chairman Mao. And I was like, that's a surprise. He hasn't told me about this. And then I looked through all the pictures and there's just random old Chinese people that have all been labeled as my grandfather. So I sent this to the Google Photos team, like, hey, do you want to fix this? And they were like, yeah, sorry, we know that it's not as good, and we've used our test data as mostly white, men and women, but mostly white people, and we'll fix it. And yeah, I didn't have a particular ending to that, but I thought it was funny. Yeah, pretty much.
So if there's folks out there in the audience right now that are not currently contributors, what is the best way you think for folks to get involved and maybe have a good first experience with maybe a CNCF project? I
would say if you can find me or anybody up here, I'm going to volunteer everyone up here. Track one of us down, and Lucas too. Probably a lot of people in this room, actually.
Yeah. Show of hands, who's a contributor?
Who's a contributor, yeah. Who would be willing to help out somebody else? Okay, who is looking for a one-on-one mentor?
I was like,
Okay, so afterwards, can we maybe get all of you guys together and we can match you up?
Yep.
Bam.
Also, just show up. There's open meetings, and you'd be surprised how few people are in some of them. Other ones, there's lots of people, but just show up. If anything, you can just listen in and kind of see what interests you or what the kind of problems people are solving.
I'll mention one thing as well, which is that I'm particularly strong at documentation, and therefore there's a lot of projects out there that need help with documentation, and I've kind of accepted that it's okay for me to make my contributions that way and not be straight code if I don't want to.
Yeah, one of the important things to remember is definitely that all contributions are now code. And Kubernetes specifically, we always need lots of help with documentation and testing. There's lots of poorly staffed efforts. Those are perennially those.
Also in Kubernetes, we have these things called mailing lists. They're wonderful if you guys are interested in finding some great drama. You can go through and we really desperately need people to help out with organizing this chaos. There's plenty of chaos, and like more than anything, like if you have an opinion or a thought or you think you can help bring order here, that's invaluable, especially in the Kubernetes community.
And if anyone did not see Tim Pepper's talk yesterday on his experience with contributing to Kubernetes for the first time, you should definitely check that out. He talked about the release team, and it's really cool introduction onto how you can be a valuable contributor without necessarily thinking about it from I have to contribute a large code feature, if you will. So check that out.
Yeah, and definitely just to follow up on that, the release team specifically, we're always looking for help staffing. So I'm one of the SIG coordinators there, so definitely.
What's a SIG?
Special interest group. So that's how we've organized Kubernetes. They're little groups of people working on related problems or feature sets. So yeah, come see us in SIG release. Unfortunately, not always the most punctual SIG coordinator. Google does spread me pretty thin across everything, but we will get you onboarded, and we're working always more and more to define good roles that people can fill. We also have dedicated shadow roles where you're able to be the second behind someone who's filled the role before, and then you can do the role yourself. So that's one way we try to help onboard people into the community.
And then I'm going to that is a good segue into my mentoring rant really quick. I actually need help with building some mentoring programs for Kubernetes. That is a great way to contribute to the project, is by helping us out with this glue. Right now we've built, in some sense of the word built, 7 different programs. They all have different use cases and different needs, and all of which you can take advantage of. The first one Chris has actually been on, which is called Meet Our Contributors. It's like mentoring on demand, if you will. It's a once-a-month live stream. We have 2 time zones, so 2 episodes, and you can ask questions on our Slack channel called Meet Our Contributors. That's in the Kubernetes organization, or Twitter with a hashtag. And the questions have ranged from what's your favorite color to why open source, why Kubernetes, why is my test flaking? Because the thing with our mentoring programs is we're not trying to just target new contributors. We're trying to target current contributors as well. I mean, that's the only way we're going to get diverse candidates up the pipeline, very similar to what organizations do with management. We have these things called owners files. That's technically our management. And it's very important that we slide folks through that management cycle. So if you are a current contributor, to those that raised your hands, please take advantage of some of these programs as well. So that's a very quick way to ask questions, like which SIG should I join? What's my good first issue, etc. So that's number 1. Number 2 is we have something that is in the process of being built called the one-on-one hour. A lot of folks always say, I don't have time to mentor. And I hear it even from mentees too, with I just don't have the time to be consistent. So this is taking that time away. It's going 1 hour, 1 mentor, 1 mentee, 1 time, and you get to pick one activity. So if you want a code-based tour of an area that looks very foreign to you, if you want a pair programming session, if you want a Ask Me Anything because you're talking to a maintainer and you think they're very valuable. And then the next thing is group mentoring. This is based off of our SIG need. So if we have a SIG, for instance, again, special interest group, like SIG networking, that says we need more approvers, we'll take a group of current reviewers and put them in a semi-structured learning environment for 2 to 3 months. And they have weekly stand-ups to keep them accountable, yet it's still on you to complete those requirements to be an approver. And then the next thing we have is mentoring events that CNCF largely puts on at things like these, like speed networking and mentoring. And then we also have the release team, which Caleb just mentioned, where there's shadow roles. This really helps us with succession planning. And those roles can just kind of be fly on the walls, and they might give you a task here and there. So it's very cool to like get in and see kind of the innards, for lack of a better word, of the project and who does what and when and where and who owns what of the code base and things like that. And I think I just forgot one of my own programs. I just realized, I was like, wow, I think I only did 6. Yeah, the group mentoring. Yeah, Lucas was actually a mentor for our test cohort. And we found out that mentoring a group of people across 8 time zones was not good. Who could have thought that time zones were going to be a killer? Let me think. Hold on, what was my other one? I did a whole talk on this yesterday, too. Oh, well. Anyway, so TLDR is get involved. There's a mentoring folder on the Kubernetes community repo. We are actually building a contributor website this year, so that'll be out before KubeCon Seattle, and mentoring initiatives will be listed on there first and foremost. And then really quickly, because we only have 3 more minutes left, panelists, why don't you give a very quick either a piece of advice or just a statement or anything that you think that folks should take away.
Please come speak at Cloud Native London if you're passing through London. I want all of you to be there. It's fine, we've got 20 years to do this. We'll get through every single person in this room.
So we set up an email, diversity@heptio.com, and we're going to write a blog at blog.heptio.com to follow up on this session. We want this to be really action-oriented, so if you have ideas, suggestions, articles, videos you think we should watch and kind of incorporate into the blog, I would love to hear from you. So please email us, diversity@heptio.com, and then check out the blog probably a week or 2, and we'll get something up.
Can we get a Slack channel?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Sure.
Kubernetes Slack diversity? Yeah, we'll get that made today.
I'm an admin, I'll make it.
I just want to say thank you to everyone here for coming. Sure to the lunch, but just to the conference in general, seeing so many wonderful applications for the diversity scholarship. It like means a lot, and like you are the change, I guess. And there's just so many people that are so wonderful to meet and who are so great and contribute so much, and I'm just really grateful that all of you are here.
Yeah, I would definitely like to echo that. Thanks for everyone for coming. And also remember, there are lots of paths into software development if that's something you want to do. I came in through maths and physics, lots of applications. There are lots of super welcoming communities, not just infrastructure. Rust has amazing stuff. Ruby has amazing stuff. Python, and IPython specifically as a subgroup there. There are people who want to help you out there, so good luck.
My one thing is you can always help one person, you can always bring one person everywhere you go, to every meeting, every phone call, every conference, every time you go out on Friday night with friends, and you have an opportunity to make that person more diverse or less diverse.
We're all hiring. That's my takeaway. Google, Heptio, StorageOS, Red Hat, we're all hiring up here, so please see us if you want opportunities. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.